Welcome back, everybody, to the calmest intro we've had in a while, I think. But this is Arts and Crimes. I'm your host, Kelly.
I'm your host.
Sorry.
It's fine.
You go.
You go last because then you
go.
call yourself a co-host.
Yeah, you
whatever.
go.
Okay. I'm Brandon.
I'm your co-host, Josh.
And I'm Brandon.
And I'm Josh.
And I'm Kelly.
Guest co-host, temporary, on assignment from NBC News.
Yep.
Picked him up from the temp agency.
Yep.
It's a it's rent to own.
Rent to own. Okay.
Okay, this episode is our very first try at Arts and Crimes Goes to the Theater. I think that's what I'm going to call
We need some
it.
different music, like...
There it is.
That's it.
Can you imagine? They turn on the pod and it just starts that.
You know what's funny? Anyone that listens to the pod that, like, I've introduced a bunch of people and they always text me back and go, "Oh, I love your music." And I would love it if we started at this one. When they're like, something happened to your music.
The one thing we liked about your pod is gone.
Unsubscribe.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that they like it because I spliced it myself. Back to what we're doing today. Here's two things about it. Two things. Number one, it's about the Godfather. And that's the movie we're doing. Fantastic. Number two, it's the end of the term. And by that I mean it's the end of the school year. That this week has been, these last couple weeks, which is usually when I do the research before the pod. And I have been barely keeping it together as a human to finish off the school year, which is typically how it is for teachers. So if there's any teachers listening, they're like, "I get it, girl. This is the truth. Facts. You're spitting facts. It's all those things." So I officially have a page and a half of notes.
Excellent. This will be the 5-minute podcast.
That does usually mean, yeah.
But I've got a lot of facts locked up here in my mind palace.
The old brain box.
Yeah.
Luckily, it usually takes us about 40 minutes to get through the first page, so it'll still be fine.
It'll be fine. So it'll be a lot less specific after the first page of notes, where I'm like, I have such good specific things, and then it'll just be raw dogging it. It'll be story time, like at lunch with my coworkers, because my poor coworkers have to put up with me when I'm researching stuff. Mm-hmm. I'll be like, "You guys, I learned the wildest thing," and then I'll tell them like half of the pod at lunch, which is great because Purdy doesn't listen.
Good.
It's a live spoiler cast.
Yeah. And then they can tell me if it sucks.
I also love that you were like, "Listen, we're going to do a movie review for first time ever. We're not going to prepare, and our movie of choice will be one of what is widely considered the greatest films of all time."
I really just want to set it up for people to hate me.
It's going to go great.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk about our week?
Oh, yeah, we do. Yeah, you do.
Yeah, you do. Because I got some announcements to make.
Oh, boy. He's starting his own podcast. Tonight I announce.
This is my last time on Arts and Crimes. I'm starting a new podcast. It's called Crimes and Arts.
I was about to make that exact joke.
You owe the hubris.
My friend from work, Kelly but a guy. And just some other Josh I found on the street. There's a lot of Joshes around. Anyway, so yeah, tell us your announcement.
All right. So for me, in the last week since we met, a couple things. So I finally got around to listening to Caramel, Sleep
that's
Token.
a good one.
Right? It is good.
Yeah.
And You pointed out, you when you first talked about it, you weren't sure if they said caramel or caramel.
But
Right.
listening to it's obviously caramel. I can't imagine them saying it another way.
Absolutely, it wouldn't fit in the song.
Yeah.
I would love it if the rhythm was right. So sometimes he says caramel and sometimes he says caramel. He's like, it fits both ways. If I need 2 syllables, they're there.
Truly genre breaking.
Yeah.
So it's got me thinking about how I was raised saying sherbet. And then one day I finally read the word and realized
It's
sherbet. And I made a conscious decision to stop saying sherbet. And you know what? Caramel seems like it's the correct spelling pronunciation matchup. So even though it sounds snooty to me,
This is your announcement. That you're going to change
I am going to start saying caramel and try and remove caramel from my
From your vernacular.
lexicon.
If you see Brandon on the street and he says caramel, you need to
You slap
call
him.
him out
Yeah,
on
Yeah.
it.
yeah, absolutely.
Just right across the face. 5 fingers.
Yeah.
Also, we had a random invite from Josh to play Helldivers 2 this
Heck
just
divers.
recently. Yeah, we need to edit that for
Probably
all you youngins out there.
My children listen to this pod. And I ruined Easter for them.
I'm so sorry.
Anyway, it was very fun. Got me back into it. They redesigned some stuff for customization, so I'm playing that all again. That was a fun night. Josh,
fun.
Josh even invited a friend along, so I want to shout out to Tweaky Fox or Twerking Fox.
Tweak Fox. You can just say Bryce. That's fine too.
Nah, Twerking Fox, you did a good job, man.
He listened to the first episode today.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So he hasn't heard
He's
you.
got a while to go before he.
In 4 months, he's gonna go. Hey, I got a call out.
Yeah, Twerking Fox.
He's like, I think I should change my name.
No, keep it, man.
No, I
Um,
meant change it to twerking
Oh,
fox.
twerk to
It's
twerking.
real guy. It's got a real
Yeah.
ring to it.
Yeah.
He twerks hard for his money. Maybe?
I twerk hard for my money.
Thank you, Kelly, for keeping that going. I was like, I regret this joke.
I strung it along.
Anyway, so that's
your
I just wanted
announcement.
to shout out and announce to the world
That you're gonna
That-
say caramel.
caramel is I feel like it's the right way
This
to
is
go.
a really big week for you.
Yeah.
I mean, it is.
It is. I'm not even. Sometimes I still say caramel because I feel like it has a better cadence when you say. I mean, I catch myself the other day. I said caramel apple, but I think usually I say caramel apple.
Get
You know
that
what?
dirty word out of here.
In the spirit of solidarity, I too must announce that I'm no longer going to say aluminum. I'm
Aluminium.
going to say aluminium.
Dang, I'm not ready for that yet. Let me get through caramel first, and then we'll worry
See how that
about
goes.
I don't
some
think
of the
it's
other
spelled
words.
aluminium. I think that it's spelled aluminum.
Well, you could say Adidas instead of Adidas
Why would I pronounce it like a different language?
because that's apparently the correct
How do you say it in
pronunciation.
French?
Oh my gosh. What do you mean is the correct? And it's very similar to a Spanish pronunciation in French, I would imagine.
I think it's the British, how the British say it. The
What?
British.
The British,
The
don't
British
Adidas.
say it Adidas.
Adidas. Yeah.
That sounds to me like someone with a
What's the
Spanish
correct
accent
pronunciation
saying
of Adidas?
It's just going to say Adidas.
Look, I can't handle this.
That says the correct pronunciation is Adidas. Adidas.
It's
Ooh.
German.
Let's hear our guy.
Adidas.
Brand which is German. In German, they would say Adidas, Adidas, without stressing on any syllable in particular.
Adidas.
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 My
Not
gosh.
Adidas.
Look,
Adidas.
I don't even remember what I was looking up. Oh yeah, aluminum.
Maybe they spell it like that over there.
Like they could spell the word color and gray differently.
Yeah, it's got.
Look at
there's
the
different-
color of his eyes.
There's different spellings apparently. So as long as I just say I'm always spelling it
The American way.
aluminum, I'm good. and I
Yeah.
can keep saying aluminum.
All right. Well, fine.
All right. Well, that's a really big reveal, and I don't know how I could follow that up with my week. Other than I finished
And-
school.
okay,
It's summertime.
Summertime.
Yeah. So for the last couple days, I have slept through most of the day, get up so I can play heck divers, and then I go right back to sleep. And I meant to get so much done today, and I also fell asleep until you texted that you were on your way. And I was like, well, the pod is what it is today.
I'm so glad that you said more. I thought at first second you were like, I don't know how I'm going to top that. And there was a pause, and I was like, she's got to say something. Or I'm talking about myself, and then we move on to the next section.
That's it. What am I-
It slowly gets smaller until it's just the Brandon updates.
Yeah.
With
Listen
your
up,
host,
guys.
Brandon Boyles.
Don't forget, you can find me at Crimes and Arts.
We focus more on the crime and less on the art.
Actually, we
fact-
just focus on me.
Art is really... It's actually
Just
just
a 45-minute week update.
How's your week going? The crime and the art that is my life.
Yeah. You're an edgy man, Bran. You're an edgy man.
Yeah.
This is the second time you told me that today.
Whoa!
You're
It must be
a
true.
G-man?
Edgy.
What did I say it for earlier?
I don't remember, but it was at Costco.
Yeah.
He was listening to Limp Bizkit.
No, that would be me.
That's Kelly.
Yeah.
She's on a big Limp
She's
Bizkit
an
kick.
edgy man.
Yeah.
All right, now listen.
Or
You've
you could
had
do, like,
your turn.
Frank
And
Sinatra.
you've had your turn, and it's time for me to make my announcement.
All right, let's hear it.
I already said it about aluminium.
Oh, wait.
That's not
What
real.
was the announcement?
He's going to be saying aluminium.
Oh,
instead
that's
of
right.
aluminum.
That's
Yeah,
right.
All right, I don't think I have anything for this week. I watched The Godfather, and it was so long. So yes,
It was so long.
I watched it. I watched the first half in like half hours anytime I had a free minute. So I like sat down and the kids were napping and I watched a half hour and then eventually, so last night I was like, I gotta get through this movie. And I watched until like 11:30 and there was a half hour left and I was like, I can't finish. And then I woke up at 6:30 this morning and finished it before the kids woke up. So yeah, I did that and work. It was a relatively uneventful week for me.
Yeah.
Well, that's all right. We can't all be reinventing our word pronunciation.
Are the lexicons?
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
so let's do this. It's time.
Yeah.
So what did you guys like? What was your first impressions of the movie? I remember because when I first watched the movies, it was a long time ago, and it was a required watch because I was dating a guy that wanted me to watch it. So I watched it, and I was like 20 something, like 21, 22, young, and I was like, well, I guess it was a movie. Neat. And I think at the time I just was like, well, it was a movie and it was good because it had a lot of references that I recognized. But I didn't like think a lot about it. So it was good for me to watch again with you, Bran, because I was like, oh, it's better the second time. As it turns out.
Okay. So you're asking for impressions
Your
of the
first
entire thing?
impressions.
Yeah,
Like-
whatever you want.
Like whatever? Okay.
Whatever you want, Bran.
All right. So,
Reinvent yourself. Say caramel.
yeah. So,
I'm gonna pronounce it the Godfather. That's my new pronouncement. It's the Godfather.
so this was my first watching. So maybe I just need a second watch and I'll enjoy it.
You know what?
even more.
Actually, okay. Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on.
We don't want your opinion, Brandon.
No. What I want what you gotta give us first is, what kind of a movie person are you?
Okay. What kind of movie person am I?
Yeah.
So
we kind of know where this stuff is coming from.
Okay. Let's see. What kind of a movie person am I? So I like. Let's see. So I can enjoy kids' movies, but I suppose that doesn't necessarily describe my preferred type. So I like. I really enjoy my entertainment to feel clever, so I don't really love slapstick, typically, or some of these more, like if the humor is really obvious. I like to be asked to think. So I don't love exposition dumps a lot of times.
You would not like Godzilla X Kong, just so you know.
Okay.
Sure.
I don't know.
I think also it's important to note that you don't consume a lot of that kind of media.
It's true. I don't sit down and watch a movie very often or television. It's just not my favorite media to consume. Like, I don't know. I don't know. Am I explaining what you wanted to hear? I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't mean like that a movie needs to be perfect, right? But I do enjoy a movie that makes me work for it a little bit. Like I enjoyed Memento a lot. Inception was a movie that I enjoyed. But I also like really love the Spider-Verse movies. I think that they're really well done. And I love the human aspects in those movies. So, yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
What about, should we all talk about?
Yeah. Oh, I think I consume a lot of that type of media. I think I watch quite a few movies and TV shows and that kind of stuff. I think it's easier to say what I really like, action, fantasy, adventure. I love like good character, good storytelling. Again, I'm not a huge slapstick person either, but I'm not against it. Sorry, excuse me. I like when a movie has like impact to it, or it's something that I can see how it's connected. So, like Godzilla. I love Godzilla. But I love, like Lord of the Rings and, classic Star Wars I grew up with and that kind of stuff. I'm trying to think of like movies that I watch, like comfort films, like that I watch more frequently, and Godzilla is probably one of them. I think I've watched Godzilla -1 more times than I should be able to admit to. So I do love like really heartfelt stories. I generally don't enjoy war films, which is, I literally just said Godzilla -1, which is a
It's sort of
post-war. Like it's not a war film, obviously, because Godzilla's in it. But I don't generally like war films, but I did think like Band of Brothers was incredibly impactful, and everybody should watch it at least once.
Is that going to be another movie you make us watch?
It's a mini-series.
Yeah,
it's a commitment.
Yeah.
That's too much.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Yeah.
But it was really, really well done, and it has, clips from the movie that they made that they tried to be as true as they could, and there are interviews from the real people that are living. It follows the story of Easy Company in World War II, and like when they find the Holocaust survivors, and one of the people that's translating he's an American Jew, and it just is like, oh my gosh, so it's like impactful and heavy, and everybody should watch it. So I guess like movies like that I really appreciate, though I tend to steer away from like, I don't really like chick flicks. I don't really like war films. I don't like stuff like that.
I don't really love war films typically either, at least not good ones. Because of what you're saying about it being impactful, I just don't. I have a hard time distancing myself from those emotions, and so I don't enjoy going through that.
Yeah.
The war films that I do stomach are like the ones that I watched with Dad.
Like silly ones?
Yeah, or like The Dirty Dozen, stuff like that. Right?
What about you, Josh?
Yeah, I like to sit down and watch movies, right? I feel like my office has a TV in it, and I got like a nice little surround sound system and a nice comfy chair, and I have like actual physical movies, and I like to sit down and watch something. So, I would say I'm not like a cinephile, but I'm a appreciator of film, right? Definitely not like a snooty one. Like,
just so you know, guys, I'm not snooty.
yeah. No, but like
The snooty ones know.
yeah, I don't know. So I really appreciate and I know a little bit about like the craft of filmmaking. Like I can usually recognize like some interesting cinematography, or something like that. Although I'm not an expert by any means, but like I love, so like of modern films, I love Denis Villeneuve, his stuff. I loved Blade Runner 2047, probably my favorite one of his. I like a lot of science fiction, especially like older stuff. I love the original Alien, and Blade Runner obviously is a big impact.
Yeah.
And then what's funny is that like we're kind of tethered to the time that we grow up, right? In terms of what our tastes are. Like we were joking about Limp Bizkit earlier, and like I grew up in the age of nu metal, so I kind of like it, even though it's generally not regarded as a great era for music.
Yeah.
But like, it's when I grew up, right?
Yeah.
And so older films have like a different cadence and a different pacing to them. And what's funny is that I do think that there are films that are pretty universal, right? And I feel like The Godfather is one of those, where like it doesn't feel like a slog, like slow pacing for slow pacing's sake, right?
Yeah.
And you can watch some older movies and be like, oh, my modern sensibilities hate this, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, like I appreciate older movies, but I also don't. I'm not just like, oh yes, I watched Citizen Kane 30 times. And it's only a true movie if it's shot by Goutenard, Francois, Pierre on the original daguerreotype.
Yeah.
It's got to be on film,
Yeah.
right? So you like Blade Runner 2047 more than the Dune movies?
Probably, yeah. Although I do think the Dune movies were really good, but I've definitely rewatched Blade Runner more times than the Dune movies. Although it's older, so.
So I don't know if I should put more effort into liking movies because I'm not a rewatcher.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in watching a movie I've already seen, and then I don't do all the digging that can be done. Right? I had a video clip come up on YouTube that was like interviewing the director for Dune. I forget his name.
Denis Villeneuve.
Yes. And he was talking about just like, he just took one scene and talked about it for a while. And it was just like amazing the amount of detail and stuff that went into, like they pan across this room and it's got a library and like there's just all this meaning that I don't know how you're supposed to get.
I think you're not supposed to get it in one viewing.
But I don't want to watch it again. and even if I did, it would still be panning across the books, and I don't know that I would draw the conclusions that they're there to inspire. It seems like I would need to study up, to read some of these books that you've got lying around here about The Godfather for me to really understand The Godfather.
And maybe it's something that's similar to like when I'm explaining an artwork and like about, why it was successful or what was controversial and all this kind of stuff about it. And, so you can enjoy it on the surface without having that all explained, but then maybe it's a little bit richer when you have somebody that does have that knowledge explain it to you. It's very similar to any other art medium. And because I think that's absolutely true. There's things that I would notice differently or things that I would miss entirely in it. Because when I watched Dune, I remember the scene where they're sitting at the table and they have this lattice work that's very Arabic. And I just loved it because I was like, oh man, the time it took human hands to make that is a lot. And they have it in their kitchen as an accent thing. And so it's a real dedication to man-made craft in this really futuristic science fiction film. And so for me, I could see these artistic notes that they were putting in, the really intricate fabrics with all of the really intricate hand beading or lacing, and all that has to be done by hand, by human hands. And that's one of the messages of Dune, is it's a triumph of human creation, because pre-Dune there's the Butlerian Jihad where machines almost took over mankind, which you don't know if you didn't read it before, which I did. And so like I understand that backstory a little bit, so I have that appreciation of those things in the film.
So I do think that it's been good for us to kind of preface who we are and how we consume before I start sharing my terribly dull opinions. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I'm the guy that skips cutscenes in games.
All right. Well, here we go. Prepare to be tuzzed. Just kidding.
First merch coming down the pipeline.
It's a shirt.
Yeah. Leave comments if you want a tuzzed shirt.
A tuzzed shirt. Okay. Well, let's start out with the very beginning inception of The Godfather, which was a book by Mario Puzo. Did you know that? It was originally a book.
I did learn that recently.
Well, there you go. So anyways, it was written by Mario Puzo. It's 448 pages long. This is where I have like notes on stuff because I wrote, so we're going to get past this real quick. And he had a couple previous books that were not super successful. And they're kind of considered failures, although they were like not received poorly, they weren't well received. But this was like in the 60s and 70s, and mafia stuff was all over the news, and it was like really kind of a popular subject to read about. And Mario Puzo didn't have any actual mafia ties. But he wanted to write a book, and he talked about how his, like publishers were like, write something about the mafia, you know, like, and I don't know how accurate that was, or if he had this story going around in his head. But they gave him like a $5,000 advance to write the book. And, cause I read, he wrote a book about his thing, and he's like a little bit of a cheeky writer. So like some of it, you're like, I don't know how true it was, but the bare bones of the facts are there. So he did receive this advance. And in the book, he said it's the only reason the book got written. It was because he was given that advance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I read, this is one of the few things I read. I tried to go in pretty without doing any research, so that I would just be the film. But afterwards, I read an interview with Francis Ford Coppola talking about the book. And he basically said Mario Puzo wrote some other stuff that he thought was much better writing. And then he was like, I need to write something that's going to be popular so that my kids have some money.
Yeah.
So The Godfather was literally like, yeah, they were like, the mafia's hot right now. He did a bunch of research. He didn't meet any of them. There's some really interesting quotes about that. But then he just wrote this thing to be a commercial success.
Sold, yeah.
And he didn't think it was his best writing. He thought some of his other books were way better.
And Al Ruddy and Francis Ford Coppola both said that his previous writing was really good.
Yeah.
And that, like, because I watched a bunch of stuff from them, and they're like, his previous writing was really good, it just wasn't well received.
Yeah.
Which like says something about the mass media, I suppose, mass market. So he wrote this book, and he gave it to his publishers, and he was like, I didn't really think it was a finished copy. Like, I had a lot of stuff that I needed to fix, but they loved it. And they got, like, while he was on vacation, they got a deal so Paramount had intentions of purchasing it before it was even finished. And then when it did finish, they purchased the rights to make the film for it. But this is like, and it became this huge success, but there's also like some people were mad about it. Like, I'm sorry. Frank Sinatra got real mad about it. Did you hear that? Did you read the story?
Yeah, because the crooner in it is based loosely on Frank Sinatra.
Yeah, and he was very upset about that.
Yeah.
What's his name? Johnny in the film.
Johnny.
Sissy
Pants.
Yeah. The singer.
The crooner.
Yeah. But he apparently saw Frank Sinatra in a restaurant, and Mario Puzo is like, oh my gosh, it's Frank Sinatra. And then Sinatra came over and was really mad about it, and he's quoted as saying, I should break your legs. Like, he was so mad. And I was like, oh, you got old blue eyes a little hot there.
I love that he's like, I'm not a mobster. I'll send someone around to break your legs.
It's so true. But yeah, so it became really popular, and so Paramount bought the rights to the movie. But during this time, there was like a real like downturn of success for movies. And there was even in some documentaries, they talked about how they were worried that cinema as a medium was finished. Like it just wasn't nearly as popular. They had a lot of flops back to back to back. And Paramount had just finished the film The Brotherhood, and it was a massive failure. They lost a lot of money on it, and it was a mafia movie right before The Godfather.
You know what's funny is a lot of stuff we think like, oh, this is a new problem, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you know how Netflix is coming out with a movie about the submarine that got crushed going down to look at the Titanic?
Oh, yeah.
And everybody's like, that's too soon. That's too soon. But this is the same thing where they were like, the mafia's in the news. Quick, write a book. Quick, before the book's even done. Let's make a movie about it. Like,
it's true.
This stuff has always happened. And it's even the same with the movie business of like, oh, the movies are dying. And they thought they were dying 50 years ago, you know? It's just funny that history is cyclical.
It's true. And
Cyclical.
You're going to pronounce it like that from now on?
He
I'm
pronounced
calling
it that
back,
way.
to an earlier episode where I said it wrong. That one.
For the real...
Good callback. The real crime.
Yeah.
What do we call our audience?
Yeah, the real A&C junkies.
Yeah.
They were like right off the heels of this major flop that was a mafia film. So even though everyone was like, write this book, make this a movie, I'm buying the rights, Paramount was like, and we'll never make it a movie. Like they like in everything I wrote, they're like, they vowed they wouldn't make it a movie. And I was like, well, good thing they're not men of their word.
They bought the rights to it and then decided not to make it?
Yeah.
Well, they probably bought the rights to it before the first one was a flop, thinking, oh, this is going to be... They spend a bunch of money on the Brotherhood, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, this is the next big thing. And then Brotherhood flopped. And they were like, we've made a horrible mistake.
Yeah. I immediately regret this decision.
Yeah.
Even though they said that they weren't going to make this the film, eventually, because of the wild success of the book, they gave in. They were like, all right, we'll make it a film, but it's going to be dirt cheap. We don't want to spend any money. And so they said that they were only willing to spend between $2 and $3 million, which is like crazy cheap. And the way that they wanted to do this was by hiring lots of really cheap stuff and people. And so they hired Al Ruddy as the director. Producer. Because he had just finished a film. And not only had he finished it early, but he had finished under budget, which is like unheard of. So they're like, get that guy!
The cheap one.
The cheap one!
We're going to make a real success here.
And then they were looking for a director. And they were like, oh, this Francis Ford Coppola guy is a nobody. He hasn't done anything.
At the time, he had just written Patton, and that was it, right?
Yeah. He was super, super new, fresh on the scene. And they were like, not only will we be able to get him real cheap, but we'll be able to push him around, because they had they wanted a lot of really specific stuff done to make it cheaper. Like they wanted to make it change the setting, because the setting of the book is the 1940s, like right after World War II. And they wanted to change it so it was made as if it was in the 1970s, because that's what year it was. It was 1970.
So you don't have to get a bunch of period clothes and cars and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, they wouldn't have to do any setting. Because, you'd have to pay for all of the extras. You can't just hire people off the street. All that stuff. So it would save a lot of money. So then they hired Francis Ford Coppola because he was young and he was broke. And so he would do it for cheap. And then they announced that they would be making the film. And Francis Ford Coppola... was like, okay, cool, I'm the director. We are not doing this in the 1970s. It has to be a period piece or I'm not making it. And there was multiple times, I was listening to, because there's quite a few interviews from Francis Ford Coppola, and he was like, there's so many times that he thought that he was going to be fired. And he did some tricky moves where he was like, they don't fire people till the weekend, so they have the weekend to find somebody, but they don't lose time during the week.
Yeah.
So he took this whole scene that they hadn't liked with Sollozzo, the main villain, I guess, of the film. And he redid some shoots with it and then resubmitted them and did a bunch of stuff that would make it really hard for them to go back on what he did. And so they're like, all right, I guess we can't fire him. Like stuff like that. But he absolutely was like, it has to be done in the 1940s. And he pushed really, really, really hard for that. And that was like hurdle number one. And they're like, fine, you can do a period piece. And which to me is like odd when they're like a period piece in 1940. I was like, you were a period piece. You were the 1970s. Because in my brain, I guess a period piece is like,
just anything older.
Anything older.
So in the past, the people that lived in the past thought it was the present. They didn't even realize they were living in the past.
What?
Yeah.
How could they not?
It's wild.
It's so crazy.
That is fun. Fun facts.
Fun facts.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. It's interesting. What would they have done with Mike?
Well, that's part of the problem is they would have had to change the story of Michael. And Coppola was like, you cannot change that. It's so important. It's integral to the story. Because he was
It really is the story.
Yeah, it's really about Michael.
Yeah.
But he also is like the embodiment of like kind of the American ideal. He's like a post-war veteran. He was a hero. He was doing all these like good things. He was, there's a lot. And so they were going to change that, which would have absolutely just destroyed the backbone of the film, I think. And I think Coppola absolutely understood that. So then the second kind of big thing that they wanted to do was they didn't want to film in New York. They wanted to film it all on like stages and stuff like that. And Coppola was like, no, can't do that. We got to film on the streets of New York. It's got to happen. And they're like, that's so much more expensive. And he was like, can't do it. You have to do it. And so it was another big fight. And again, he thought he was going to get fired. But eventually Paramount gave in and they were going to start filming in New York. And then kind of the third of his big, like, pre-filming hurdles that Coppola had to get over was who he wanted to be in the film. And the studio, Paramount in particular, had a huge problem with Marlon Brando, who is Vito Corleone, and Al Pacino, who is Michael Corleone. And they were like, absolutely not. Neither of those two, never. We vow to never hire them. Like, they were super against Brando.
Why?
So they were really against Brando for a couple of reasons. One, at this time, his career was sort of flagging. It was waning quite a bit. And they didn't want this like old guy that wasn't relevant anymore. Also, he was known for being difficult to work with. And they didn't want to deal with any of those issues.
So in this same interview, I learned a little bit about how he convinced them to get Marlon Brando. Were you going to go over that?
You are right now.
Okay. So, yeah, he was known to be difficult, right? Specifically, he would, like, cause delays on set. He wouldn't want to come out of his trailer. He famously, for this movie, refused to learn his lines. So they would have to make cue cards for him. Brandon just made it look like, what's wrong with that?
No, that wasn't the face.
What was the face?
The face,
That was like, how outrageous.
Yeah, I was joining in the outrage of like.
I thought you were going like,
making
I love
cue
cue
cards.
cards. Anyway.
As I'm sitting here with cue cards for Brandon.
Yeah. Now make a face. Okay. So yeah, he was difficult, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for Coppola talks to the producers and he's like, he's who I want. And they go, nope, absolutely not. And he's like, listen, I'm the director. You've got to have like a dialogue. You've got to give me a way to make this work. And they were like, all right, we'll do it under 3 conditions. Condition number 1, he does it for free. Condition number 2, you've got to get him to audition. He famously also didn't enjoy auditioning, right?
Okay.
And rule number 3 is you need $1 million bond so that if he causes any disruption to the shooting, we get $1 million from him. So he needs to put up $1 million.
And not get paid.
Yeah. And so Coppola was like, well, they gave me something I could work with. And I couldn't do 2 of those, but I could do 1 of them. I just had to trick him into the audition. So he talked to him about it, and he was like, hey, we're just going to do a little, like, improv scene, and we just kind of
Marlon Brando.
Yeah,
he's
Brando.
Yeah.
He was like, so Coppola talked to Brando and was like, we're just going to do like a little improv. We're going to record it. It'll be fun, whatever, you know. And he was like, okay, sure. So they just showed up at his house and had like a bunch of props and some people with cameras outside his front door. And then they knocked on the door and they were like, hey, come out. And they just started recording. They were like, he's going to do something that looks like an audition. And so he came out. And one of the reasons they didn't want him was because he's 47. He was younger than he was supposed to be. And he was blonde. And so but he saw like all of the props arrayed. And there was like some Italian food and stuff. And so he got some shoe polish and put it through his hair to turn his hair black, and then he just kind of started, you know, like he ate some of the food and like, oh, I'm not good to father, you know.
And he like didn't he put like the tissues in his mouth?
That came later.
Oh, it was later.
That was an idea later on. But yeah, so he did this and they recorded it, and then he like cut it together and sent it to the studio. And was like, look, here's a guy who hates auditions and he did one for us. He's a real team player. And I don't know if Marlon Brando ever knew that was what was happening, but
it didn't say one way or the other.
Yeah. So once they got that, they were like, we can't not pay him anything, but we'll pay him scale, which is just like the minimum you can pay an actor. And he agreed to that. And then he was like, listen, we got 2 out of your 3 things. We're not going to get $1 million from this guy, but like, look how good he was with this audition. Obviously, he's a team player now, and he'll be great. And they agreed to it.
Yep.
That's what I researched.
That's also what I researched. Okay, and I adored that they had to trick him into doing an audition tape.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Fun story.
And with Al Pacino, they really didn't want Al Pacino because he was new. Like, he hadn't really done much. So he was new, kind of a nobody, and he was short. So, again, he's 5'6", which I don't think is that short, but
so in the same interview, Coppola was talking about how he kept wanting somebody who looked like him, who was like a swarthy, you know, dark hair, Italian.
Because Coppola is Italian, an Italian American. Yeah.
And the studio head wanted a tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, like movie star.
Yeah.
And there are like blonde Italians. But they were in this battle about like who was going to win. Was it going to be someone like the producer or someone like the director?
And Coppola won. He got Al Pacino. Yeah. And like I really loved that because for Coppola, in a lot of the interviews that I read with Coppola, he talked about how he didn't have any information about mafia stuff. Like he was not connected to the mafia. He didn't have experiences with the mafia. But what he did have experiences with was growing up as an Italian American in an Italian American home. And that for him was like the core of the film, is he wanted to bring all of those experiences onto the film so that it would feel like a genuine family, a real Italian American family. And so I think for him, it was really important that he got Pacino because that was a huge part of making that a reality. So he did. He got Al Pacino. He fought for it and got it. And he's so fantastic as Michael Corleone, but he is so outside of what I imagine as Al Pacino. Because when I imagine, Josh and I were talking about this earlier, when I imagine Al Pacino, I think of his like loud, like forceful speeches that he does in all of his films later. And he's so like soft spoken and like almost unsure of himself through the film, which is so interesting.
You know what's funny? So we were talking about it and I compared it to, have you seen Heat? Mm-mm. So Heat is a like mid-90s crime movie, and Al Pacino plays a cop and Robert De Niro plays the criminal. And they're really good, but Al Pacino is wild, and like he basically later he was like, I thought my character would be on cocaine, so I acted like I was on cocaine all the time. And I was like, so he's really wild, right? And so we talked about that, and I showed the scene where it's like, she's got a great behind. Have you never heard that quote?
And you've got your head all the way up it.
Yeah. It's just the most like bombastic thing, right? But what's funny is in the same movie, like there's one of the characters that kind of gets forgotten is there's I don't remember if it's a stepdaughter or just his girlfriend's daughter or something, but there's like a teenage girl that he kind of like is friends with, right? He's sort of a father figure for her. And like you kind of forget about her. She almost disappears from the screen, and then in a break between action, he shows up back at home, and she tried to kill herself, and he like picks her up and takes her to the hospital, and it's this very like tender the way he acts, right? And I was thinking about that, how even in that film where he is being this more like wild, he still has this very like human, like gentle element to him, which is so funny, and it's what made him like so perfect for this role.
Yeah.
It's really
he really embodies that like gentle human.
Yeah.
Because you don't see him do anything that you're like...
The very last scene.
Yes.
I was like, there's the Pacino I know.
Yeah, when he like slams on the table and yells.
Enough.
Yeah. Don't ask me about my work, Claire. Wait, was that her name?
Kate.
Kate.
K-A-Y.
Oh, just K.
Yeah.
K. Anyways. So yeah, he gets Al Pacino. There we go. He's like on a roll. So, this is where my notes stop. So we're just raw dogging it.
Well, no, I think this is a good place to start it, because basically what we know is that it was a difficult movie to create.
Yes.
And there was a lot that it took to overcome it.
Yeah.
And it's a long movie.
Yeah, it really is. And like before, so they finally get to where they can film, and they go to New York to film, and they're met with a lot of resistance. So at this time as well, Italian Americans were not being portrayed very well in films. Because again, they'd had quite a few mafia films, and they were always like this really terrible stereotype of this version of American. And so they're like, oh, we all talk like it is, like just kind of offensive. And so there was the Italian American Civil Rights League that was founded at this time. And they were like, we will not let this film happen. And they were very successful at it because it was led by a mafia boss. So the mafia boss was Joseph Colombo. And he was like, this film isn't going to happen. We won't let it happen. And they literally stopped them from filming. So they would try to film, and then there was one story that Al Ruddy was talking about where they went into a restaurant and they came back out and their trucks were all gone because they had been stolen. And they would people would come and steal cameras, really expensive cameras, and they would come and disrupt the filming happening. And then the people would get permission to film at like a restaurant or something, and then they would come back the next day to film, and suddenly those people wouldn't want them filming in their restaurant, and they would close them out because people came and talked to them to get them to stop. And so this was like a real huge issue, and Al Ruddy was starting to get a bunch of like death threats, and people were coming to like his home and calling his home. And so they were like, we got to get this film made, and we got to figure this out. So in true like Godfather fashion, Al Ruddy met with the mob boss to figure out if they could come up with an agreement to work so that they could all be happy to make the film. And so Joseph Colombo, he spoke to Al Ruddy, and they wanted to be portrayed how Italian Americans really were. They didn't want to reinforce a lot of these like really terrible stereotypes and like demeaning ways of viewing them. And they demanded that the word mafia and Cosa Nostra was not in the film. Do you know what Cosa Nostra is?
No.
So Cosa Nostra just means our thing in Italian, which I think is adorable. It's the actual name of the mafia. It's Cosa Nostra. And they didn't want any of that in the film. So Al Ruddy agreed to not have either of those words said in the film at all. And in an interview later, like I was, again, watching interviews and reading interviews and stuff from him, he was like, what was funny was we only used the word once. They only used the word mafia once. Cosa Nostra wasn't in it at all. And in the movie, there's a scene where Tom, the lawyer, goes to try and convince the movie producer to let the singer have that major part in the film.
Yes.
And that producer yells all these angry slurs at Tom. And then Tom's like, I'm actually German American. Like he's in that list of slurs, he called him like a mafioso or something. That's the only place the word was used. And so he's like, so I still said all of those nasty slurs and I just took out the word mafia. And so it was like they still had the sense of the scene. You know, Joe, what is it? Joe Colombo. Yeah, Joe Colombo hadn't said not to use any of those other words, so they did, and it was fine. So as soon as they struck that deal, there was kind of two things that happened. One, they could start filming, so that was good. Suddenly their cameras were back, and they didn't have trucks getting stolen anymore. But the people above Paramount, whoever that is, like the film industry, was like, you struck a deal with the mafia, you no good. And they fired Al Ruddy. They fired him. And they were like, we can't have this film because you can't be making deals with the mafia. And Paramount and Coppola were like, no, we can't. We can. And so like debated back and forth for a little bit, but they ended up hiring back on Al Ruddy and they could start filming. And so while they were filming, they were also trying to fill roles, and they were shooting the like wedding scene, and they needed to find a few actors for a few parts. And since the mafia was fairly connected with the filming now, they kept showing up and being like, hey, we got this guy that wants a new job. He wants to like maybe change his career, and put him in the film. And they're like, okay. So they like found spots for a bunch of the like mafia people. And so some of the bigger roles, not the biggest obviously, are actual people that were in the actual mob. So one of my favorites, his name is Lenny Montana, and he plays Luca Brasi, who is the like big bodyguard.
Big guy. Yeah.
And so he used to be a professional wrestler, and then he was an actual bodyguard in the mafia. And so he was there bodyguarding at the like filming stuff, and Coppola was like, he would be a great bodyguard. and he wanted to change his profession, and he thought it'd be cool to be a movie star. So they hired him, and his first scene is that scene with the Godfather, where he's like, thank you for inviting me on the day of your daughter's wedding to your daughter's wedding. That scene where he like absolutely flubs that line. And that wasn't the intent of the film. He actually did like absolutely mess up that line, but he just kept going with it. And Marlon Brando also kept going with it. So then Coppola added back in later where he was sitting practicing his lines to make it look like he was nervous. And then they just kept that in, so it was just like part of who he was in the film.
Which was a genius thing, just to show how intimidating
The Godfather was.
Yeah, The Godfather.
Because this guy, Luca Brasi, is 6'6".
Yeah.
He's described as 6'6" and 320 pounds. Like, he is a girthy man. Like, he is thick. So.
All right.
That's how I would describe him.
There's a mountain of a man there.
Yeah. Here's a couple of fun facts.
Okay.
Because I just wanted to remember to put them in there because we were talking about Marlon Brando. Sorry, this is a thing. A switch. But you were talking about how Marlon Brando didn't remember his lines. And he didn't. Like, Coppola would, like, just have cue cards for him. And in the commentary from Coppola, he talked about, he's like, with that kind of actor, you don't direct him. You don't tell him what to do. You give him options. And he does things. And so in the very beginning of the film, he has a cat on his lap and he's petting the cat. And in one of the takes, that's like a studio cat that is just like around. And one of the takes, Coppola just picked it up and handed it to Brando, and he just used it in the, like, just the cat was so happy to be in his lap. And So much so that its purring was so loud that it you couldn't hear Brando's lines over the cat's purring, and he had to redub his lines. But he liked how, like, you see this mob boss that is essentially being like, I'll go beat these guys for your justice, because the justice system didn't work. But also there's like this, he's playing so gently with this little kitten in his hand, you know? And so it's like this sort of beautiful picture of who this man is, both soft and hard kind of thing.
I think it was a good setting the stage a little bit for Vito's character too, because he emphatically would not agree to kill those men.
Yeah. Because that's not justice.
Yeah. He talked about justice and made sure that the people he sent wouldn't get out of control.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah. I just think it's so interesting. Like, you know, I've never been like I love the Godfather films. I love them. I was like, I have seen that film, and I now know where these references are coming from, because there's, you know, references from like kid movies like Zootopia you were talking about. There's multiple references from in Futurama, like the Donbot is the Godfather, and he has Joey Mouse Pads, and they all have these like very Godfather like nicknames and that kind of stuff. And in just like so many films you hear, I looked it up and there's like hundreds of references, but they're like, it's impossible to count how many times it's been referenced.
right.
And so that's kind of why I was like, wow, it's good that I watched it. But like learning about it, I was like, this is so terribly interesting. And I think it just sort of proves the idea of like, when you learn more about something, it can add so much flavor to it, depending, you know?
Yeah.
And like they really wanted to make the film feel authentic, which is like they wanted to hire as many like Italian Americans as they could. Although Marlon Brando's not one, and what is it? Is it James Caan is not one, who plays Sonny. Al Pacino is. He's an Italian. Here's a fun fact: is not only is Al Pacino an Italian American, but guess where he is from? Sicily, Corleone. So he is literally from Corleone, Sicily. And so it's like perfect. But another guy that is actually an Italian American is so John Cazale, the guy that plays Fredo, is an Italian American. He's Italian Irish. So I guess there's that. But there was also, so Connie Corleone, the sister of Michael Corleone, is Francis Ford Coppola's sister. So she's also Italian American.
No, that's funny.
So in the film, Coppola has both of his parents, his sister, and his niece. The little baby that gets blessed at the end, even though he's like, she plays a boy, but it's a baby. You can't tell. So it's actually his niece. And then his mother is in that scene, and she actually kisses the little baby in the scene. But also his parents are or were musicians, and they composed a lot of the music that was in the film, especially the music that is played in Italy. And so the like wedding scene in Italy where he's walking and they have that band, both of them are also in that procession playing music. So his family is in there. Also, the guy that plays Clemenza is an Italian American. I forgot about him. He's the guy that says, "Take the gun, leave the cannoli."
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Which was an ad-libbed line, by the way. The script says, "Take the gun," and then his
leave the gun.
Yeah, leave the gun, take the cannoli. There it is. So the leave the gun, take the cannoli is an ad-libbed line that was actually suggested to him by his on-screen wife, the actress, because when he leaves to go kill Polly in that scene, she says, "Don't forget the cannolis."
Right.
And then she came up to him before they did this other line, and she suggested that he remembers the cannolis because his wife told him to. And I think that it was a well-known like understanding of the film that it was a lot like the heart of it was family, and so she wanted to make sure that like all of the characters kept that in mind. And so he's like, leave the gun, take the cannoli, because he wanted to make sure he brought it back for his wife.
Right.
which is so precious. So yeah, this is the problem of me not having it written down. I can't get myself back on track, and I've got myself off track. But those were the 2-part problems, right? Is that they, originally Al Ruddy got fired, and then they got him back, and then they were filling spots with. So anyways, the mafia is like super involved in all of the filming and also filling the characters. And so throughout the entire film, ow! I forgot I have a burn. I snapped right on my burn. It hurt. So another one of the characters that was an actual mafia member was the brother-in-law. The guy that plays the brother-in-law.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I forget his name.
Who knows?
I can't remember.
It's a mystery.
It's a mystery. But he was this like pretty boy mafia guy, and he wanted to get into the film industry. And so they hired him to be the brother-in-law. Which also Coppola talks about having his sister play Connie, which was hard for him because he was like, it's not fun to watch scenes of your sister getting beat, like with a belt, even though it's like off screen, a lot of it and that kind of stuff. And speaking of that, I'm just sort of getting into like fun facts of the film, because like really after the mafia got involved and Al Ruddy was back as the producer, the filming went great. Other than Coppola was constantly trying to be undercut with like saving money. They wanted to cut out a bunch of scenes. They wanted to cut a bunch of different like aspects of the film because they wanted it to be cheaper. And the other thing that they struggled with was how he filmed the film. So the very first kind of shoots that he did, he sent in and they were like, it's too dark. It like you can hardly tell what's happening in half of these scenes. We can't do it. And much to the integrity of Francis Ford Coppola, he pushed his idea. He wanted to make sure it was seen, which was these really extremes, which when I was watching it, I was like, we were right on the heels of Caravaggio.
I know, I thought that too.
And I was like, he's really pushing this almost like tenebrism style, because when you're watching, like, and there's like a couple scenes where you have Michael and he's like his face is in such extreme shadow that you can't see, and then the other half of his face is real bright lit. And it is so striking and so powerful, and I think it kind of helps elevate kind of the emotion and the intensity of it. And I think the other thing, in the interviews, Coppola talked a lot about the audio, like the sound effects and stuff, that kind of helped amp up some of those emotions and some of that like realism too. Like the sound people made sure that outside of the Corleone house was gravel instead of cement. And so as you hear them walk across the gravel, you can hear that like the shoes footfall on gravel instead of cement or anything else. And he was like, he became such an integral part of that like auditory experience, that it like really pushed a lot of the feelings of the film as well. So then the filming, other than that, like went pretty well, other than battling for money. And it did go over budget. I think they ended up spending $6 million, which was quite a bit more than what they intended. I could be wrong. I'll have to look that up. It's either 6 or 9, but it's much more than they intended. But did you have something to say?
No, I was going to say we should hear Brandon's take on it finally.
$6 million.
$6 million. Okay. I was right the first time.
Okay. So switching gears, my take on the movie. All right. So I would say that I rather enjoyed it. So it was surprisingly long, and I didn't realize how long it was. Like, I didn't look into it before we started it. So
fun fact.
Yeah.
Coppola originally cut it down to 2 hours and 15 minutes because he thought that they would fire him for having it so long. And then they got really mad at him for cutting it down so much. And he was like, oh, I realized they were going to be mad at me no matter what I did. So they put it all back in.
That's funny.
It's funny. So I thought, I went into the watching with really no like prior knowledge of it. So it was all new for me. So it starts off with Marlon Brando's character, Vito, like chilling in his dark office, talking to this guy. And
Bonacera.
The
Undertaker.
Undertaker, yeah. And I thought, what a weird encounter here, because he's like, if you had come to me as friends, maybe we could do this, And he's like, and the other guy's like,
be my friend.
Can we be friends? And he's like, okay. I'm just what an interesting start here. And it's so busy. It's a very busy movie. It feels like a lot of things going on. And so you mentioned the pacing on it. And I think that the pacing was pretty good. It was interesting because I didn't find it bothering me terribly, my modern sensibilities. But I did, there was a point 20 minutes into the movie or whatever where I was thinking, not a lot has happened. It
was a long wedding scene at the beginning.
Yeah. And I was like, by this point in the movie, we'd have 3 different plot lines going. And there's still, I'm not even sure what the plot is.
I do so what I took from the pacing of individual scenes is slow, but the pace of the movie is fast because it covers so much time.
Yeah.
So
it jumps quite a bit between scenes.
They have these big jumps. So they have this kind of leisurely wedding scene, and then it'll jump days or months or one time a year later, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I mentioned to you that it felt like I was seeing snapshots. And so it was a little bit jarring that there wasn't as smooth of transitions as you usually get in a movie nowadays, I feel. But I think that did kind of help it go along. What am I supposed to be doing?
Are you any
I don't
kind
know
of
where I'm
commentary?
supposed to go with this.
Yeah. Any kind of commentary.
All right.
This is loosey-goosey, obviously,
Yeah.
man. Loosey-goosey.
So, they didn't explain a lot. It felt like there was plenty of times where I was being expected to just figure things out, which I appreciated. And Sonny's assassination was silly.
I felt like it was it all made sense.
They have 10 guys crouched down in a toll booth, hoping that Frank will beat his wife enough to piss off Sonny enough that he'll come flying in a rage.
Well, no. At the end, they specifically say that was on purpose.
Yeah.
Frank set Sonny
I know that Frank did it on purpose, but it still depends on so many things. What if Sonny was just like, I'm going to kill that guy later today? There's just
I think
a million moving parts.
I think it's one of those things, though, that when you put it together, to me, it did make sense. Because, Sonny has proven that he flies into a rage all the time. He's already on a real thin rope with everything that's going on. And he already threatened that the next time that the brother-in-law beat his wife, that Sonny was going to go and kill him. And Sonny is definitely one of those people that's I said it, I'm going to do it,
Sure.
So... and later when they do talk about how it was a setup by the brother-in-law, it was, I feel like it was just one of those things where they just knew their enemy well and did it and did the correct setup. I felt like he was a predictable guy. He was always real predictable.
Well, also the fact that it takes place at a toll booth, toll booths exist because they're a bottleneck, right? They knew Sonny had to go that way in order to get to his brother. Mm-hmm. They knew he was going to go get his brother-in-law. And you notice that they had 50 guys. So I think even they thought they got lucky that it was just Sonny. Yeah. But they planned for, if it's Sonny and a whole entourage, we'll still get him because we've got 90,000 bullets.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sure.
I don't know. There wasn't any, for me, there wasn't any part where I was like, that was outrageous. Like I feel like
I did think it would be hard to sneak that horse in.
Yeah.
I was like, he's covered in
slept
warm
through.
blood.
that's true.
Yeah.
That was the outrageous part.
Yeah. So iconic, though.
So iconic. Yeah.
Iconic.
It's
Yeah.
like an iconic scene, you know. They
Yeah.
know it. Everybody knows it.
I'm just so unplugged, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think there's still some times where I didn't figure out why they were including things. You know, like there's a scene where they're just randomly he's being taught how to make sauce.
Oh yeah. You know what the reason why that's in there
Why?
is because Francis Ford Coppola wanted to put a recipe. He was like early on, he said he wanted to put a recipe in all of his films because that way if somebody went to his film and they didn't like the film, at least they'd get something out of it.
All right. Well, now I know why it was there.
Yeah.
Well, like, symbolically, too, right? So, what's that character's name?
Clemenza?
Clemenza, yeah. When Clemenza introduced, he's like, what do you know? You're going to have to be cooking for 20 guys at some point in the future. Let me teach you, right? And it's kind of this foreshadowing that, like, oh, Michael's going to be taking care of these people in the future, right?
What I missed that completely because I don't think that the head of the mafia cooks for 20 men. Like the less important people cook for 20 men.
But I think that's also part of the idea behind that group is that they are a family and like, yeah, he's the head of the family, but that doesn't mean that he's exempt from being part of the family and doing all the parts, right? Because you see the Godfather is like, you know, helping take care of things at the wedding. He's helping like advise. He is, you know, he goes and buys fruit. Like he could have sent somebody to go buy fruit. The scene where he gets the assassination attempt, he's the one picking up fruit himself.
True.
And so it's this idea, I think, that being the head of the family doesn't mean you're better than the family. It's just you have the responsibility of taking care of the family.
Yeah. I think that idea of this responsibility like comes up quite a bit, and I found it to be like an interesting part of it. I think I don't know why necessarily, but one of my favorite scenes is between Vito and Michael, and they're in Vito's study or whatever, and he's talking about I think that Sonny like went off on like
Angry?
yeah.
His famous temper?
Yeah. And so the movie is very dismissive of women. Like there's women getting beat and there's men cheating on their women all the time.
And it's like standard.
And yeah. It's
And she
just
knows
like,
he is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? And that's not good. Right? That I felt like that scene really showed that, you know what? Nobody was really in a good spot at that time. It was the Godfather sharing for a moment with his son, like there is so much pressure on us, on the head of the family. Like, so, you know, it's, don't cry, right? He slapped around the crooner for crying. And, you know, don't be careless. There's no room for error, you know. And I don't know why, but that scene really struck me.
I think it is, there's a lot of things in there like that are really impactful, but like really subtle. 'Cause like there's so many things that you're having to pick up on this film that is like a very subtle thing. Like the whole reason that Sollozzo decides that he's going to assassinate Vito and try and get Sonny in charge is because in that one meeting, Sonny says half a sentence about, you know, so you think that your guys can protect our investment, and Vito tells him to be quiet, and then Sollozzo picks up on that and is like, okay, we're staging a coup because I think Sonny's behind my idea.
Right.
And so I think that it's adding those things in that are not like slapping you in the face with these messages, but that, you know, when you sit with them or when you watch it again or whatever, you can kind of feel that, because like that's true. Like they're in this system that they're in and that we're kind of in. We're in it. Like nobody's winning. It's not good for anybody, because like women are disregarded. They're, you know, considered more of an item, you know, and maybe some women like being flighty and disregarded, or like, you know, not involved, but so do some men, you know, and a lot of women don't want that. They don't want to be treated that way. They have opinions. They have things to say. They can also do just as well in situations of like power and of, you know, a position like the Godfather, but they're not allowed to. But in that same situation, the men are stuck in this role that they're not allowed to be anything else to be successful in the world that they're in. And so it's just as damaging in an entirely different way.
It really is.
Yeah.
Like I see in myself some of these older things. Like I feel like I don't identify a lot with them, right? But I don't know where it came from, but I do feel like I can't be a burden.
Yeah.
Like my job in life is to support and carry others.
Yeah. Which is funny because also for me, and I think it probably comes from our upbringing, I also think I can't be a burden. I have to be quiet. I can't have loud opinions. I can't disrupt people. I need to minimize myself so that other people can feel that they are successful. And so it's like literally the same thing, but very different.
Right. We have different jobs,
but it's just like literally the same, where I'm like, I can't be a burden and you can't be a burden, but we're just like, we have to destroy who we are to make that same thing happen in very different ways. And it just is, I think that's why things like that in these films are so impactful, because you're like, for a moment, you're seen. For a moment, somebody understands that struggle that you have. And I think this film has a lot of those moments.
Hold on, I have one question.
Yes.
So here's something that I wanted to talk about, which is, this is one of those movies that I think people get the wrong message from a lot. Like, people admire Vito and Michael, right?
Yeah.
And people look at that and go, those are real men, you know?
Yeah.
And watching the movie, it's apparent from the very first scene that it's not a good life.
Yeah.
So they're at, and this is the whole point of the first scene, the first, like, the wedding, is to show how powerful the Godfather is, right? And yet they also have him in his office peeking through the Venetian blinds to see what everybody is doing, right?
Yeah.
He is in his place of power, and it's full of people that he invited.
Yeah.
And all of the protection in the world, and he's still peeking out his windows. And even though it's not implicit, like they're not specifically like he's afraid.
Yeah.
It's more like, oh yeah, he's looking. But that's like visually, that's the image of somebody who is afraid, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I like, the point is that there's the constant threat of violence, right? At any time, anything could happen, and it's a terrible way to live. And he lives his whole life in fear, right? Even though he goes, like, you know, he slapped Johnny around, and he tells his son, like, you can't be, you've got to be in control and everything. Like, to me, the point of the film was like, this is a bad way to live, and it leads to like all this fear. And yet a lot of people watch the movie and they don't clue in on that, and they go, it's so cool, you know, I've got these mobsters that are in charge of everything, and they're so powerful, you know. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's a good life, and I don't think it's a way that anybody should live.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not going to take a dissenting opinion on it, that it's
Or whether
that
you
it's
should be a mob boss.
crappy.
You're like, I disagree.
I do also think that Vito recognized that his life was not great. Like that I think he felt trapped. Like he had all this power, yes, but he had to live a certain way to maintain that, and that whether he wanted that power or not, he had to maintain it.
Yeah.
Because the family's depending on him.
Well, and if he loses it, he gets killed.
I didn't interpret him looking through his blinds as fear. I felt that it was longing. Like he wants to be out there with the family. He's looking out the window longing to be out there.
Well, and that could be true, but I think Coppola included those shots to plant that idea that it's a fearful life. Whether or not he was saying like, oh, he's afraid in this moment. I don't think he was afraid in that moment. But I think like the visual of a guy looking out his Venetian blinds was meant to imply like, hey, this is scary.
Yeah. Another moment that I liked, should we have some other people going? There's another scene where, once again, it's Vito and Mike talking. And Vito is talking about his wishes for Michael. That, he was supposed to be a senator or something, right? Like, be a legitimate man.
Yeah.
And that got me thinking, kind of revisiting the earlier movies, right? And very early on in the movie, they set what your expectation of Mike is when he tells the story to Kay about how Johnny got his first contract or got out of a contract, right? It's the first time they used
he made him an offer he couldn't refuse.
Yeah, right? That phrase comes out and he's like, that's not the man I am. That's my father, right? Yeah. And so they've set this, like, now you know who Mike is, right? And as the movie goes along, right, there's a point where Mike makes a decision and he says, I'm going to be the one to kill these two people.
Yeah. And
later, this scene happens with Vito where he's talking about what his aspirations for Mike were. And I think that for me, at that moment, that was when my opinion or view of what and who Mike was completely changed. Because he didn't talk with great conviction about, this is not who I am, that's my dad. I feel like Vito saw greatness in Mike and was trying to push him to be more than the family. And Mike just wanted to be in the family.
Yeah.
And he was trying to live up to this ideal of what his father was trying to make of him and be a military man and be a good guy and be outside. But I think he felt outside. And when his father, the assassination attempt happened and Sonny was just like not making things better, he saw a chance to step in and seize power and be the part of the family that he always wanted to be. And so I think at the end of the movie, he is exactly where he wanted to be from day one.
Yeah.
I'm going to disagree with you.
Do it.
Yeah, this is why we're here.
Yeah. So I think that you could be right that he wanted to be part of the family. I think that most people want to be part of the family, right? And he probably felt excluded. They called him a civilian earlier, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, the only reason he gets drawn in is because he shows up at the hospital to visit his dad, who's dying, who's sick, and all the cops have been pulled, right?
Yeah.
And he can, if he leaves, he knows his dad will be killed, but he won't be involved, right? So it's not really a choice. He's got to stay and protect his dad.
Yeah.
And that's what pushes him into this world, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if he wanted to be a part of it, but the first choice he makes is, I'm going to protect my dad. And I love that. That was probably one of my favorite scenes, was the hospital scene. And there were all these fun little details about it. But after the hospital scene, then when they have the thing and he's like, I'm going to go kill it, I think is when he's making a choice. Like, no, I'm going, like, to that point, he still could have potentially gone back to who he was, but he makes a choice. And again, I don't think it's his making a choice because it's what he wants necessarily. I think in his mind, he's going, I need to protect my family. This is what has to happen so that they stop going after my dad, right?
Yeah.
Like, so my read of it, which again could be wrong, was like everybody, he wants to be part of his family, but he didn't want to be a criminal. And like how much he hesitated, right? Remember...
You felt that he hesitated?
Yeah, because remember how he said to do it? Remember how he said to kill him? What's his name? Credenza? What's the guy's name? Clemenza was like, grab the gun and come out of the bathroom shooting, right?
And he sat at the table for a while.
Yeah. He put the gun in his pocket and he came and he sat, and it was obviously this struggle for him. Mm-hmm. And they even have the sound of the train, right? And the screeching brakes. Like, he could stop right now if he wanted to. He doesn't have to do this.
Yeah.
And then he makes the decision, right?
Yeah. So, interestingly, in the commentary that I listened to from Coppola, he talks about this hospital scene specifically and how it's a pivotal moment for Michael. And he talks about how, it's the baker that is out there with him, and he like gets rid of the flowers, and it's like a big bluff that they have guns to stop those guys from going in and killing his father. And then the moment is past, this like really intense moment, and the baker pulls out a cigarette, and his hands are shaking so bad that Michael has to take the lighter and lights it. And he's like, in this scene, I wanted to focus on those hands because you see the baker is absolutely trembling and Michael is not. And this is when Michael realizes that he can handle these sort of situations and that he might be able to be what is needed for the family, essentially. And so it's a realization for Michael as well that there's this other potential that he could fill.
You know what was funny to me? Also, I just want to have a little sidebar. When Sonny was like, this isn't like the war over there where you're shooting them from 100 yards. You got to be right up in their face. Bow,
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know what he thinks about war, but I'm under the impression it wasn't super pleasant.
Yeah, but no.
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of shows Sonny, like, who Sonny was.
Yeah.
Like, he had this really inaccurate view of the world and how things should be, and man, he thought he was just invincible.
Yeah,
he did have that, like, and I think that was part of who he was. That
was his downfall.
Yeah,
just untouchable.
Yeah, and this like rage that he always had, his famous rage. So yeah. Also, I was like, I don't know why this was something that I enjoyed. In the scene when Sollazzo calls and he's like, "You're gonna meet me at 8:30 or whatever, and don't fly off into your like famous rage." And he takes a pencil and he writes on the cupboard 8:30, like to remember what time. And I'm like, okay, for starters, you have one thing to remember, Sonny. Like, you shouldn't have to write that down.
Also, who writes on a cupboard?
But yeah, he like wrote it on a cupboard, and I just was like, it's so Sonny because he like doesn't think about the consequences. Because like now somebody's gonna have to come and clean that off the cupboard. Like, I don't know why I just like, it's such a small, simple thing that's like, this is very Sonny. He doesn't think about the consequences. It's in the moment, and he like can't keep one thing in his brain, so he's got to write it down to make sure, And I liked those details in the film. It felt like real human, but also like reinforced who you're looking at.
Yeah. I would have loved if he sticks his tongue out and writes up like murder 8:30.
Yeah. So
the police are in his apartment later. I can't figure this code out.
What does this mean?
8:30.
What could it possibly?
The kill zone.
A diagram. He has like a stick figure.
With big old guns.
Yeah.
So I think, I'm going to continue to push my interpretations of things.
Yeah.
So another thing that I think that points towards Michael not really wanting to be in the life that he was in is his time in Italy. Because it doesn't seem to me that he misses his life. He doesn't miss Kay. He
goes and marries another woman.
He goes and marries another woman very quickly. And like you mentioned that there's a bunch of time jumps between scenes. So it's sometimes hard to figure out how long it's been. I don't know
how long they dated.
His bruise is still on his face from the punch.
That's what we kept track of. Is his bruise okay,
well,
also,
but they said later that a surgeon had to fix it.
Yeah, so like in the filming, the intent was that it wasn't just a bruise, like he broke his jaw. And so it is months that it takes to fix. And that's why Al Pacino, like Michael, is talking with his jaw clenched, because they actually had somebody come and wire his jaw.
Wait, did he actually break?
I don't think he actually broke it. I think they just came and
they wired his jaw.
That's
shut
what Coppola was saying, and I was like, "That's insane." But I guess you'll have to look it up to verify. But I was like, because he wanted it to be authentic to the injury that he received.
We're still talking like a month's. We're talking months timeline for
Instead
him to be in Italy, find a girl, court her, get married.
Here's how I saw it, and maybe it's because this is sort of just the way that I am, and so for me, I'm like, oh, this is what he did. Is when I make a decision, it's made, and I am 100% dedicated to that decision. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not going to waffle anymore, because that doesn't help me achieve. And so I sound like I'm an achiever. I do things. I don't. But when I make a bad decision, I'm also committed to that decision. But like that's how I felt like it was for Michael. I feel like at the hospital, he realized these two divergent paths were possible for him. And then in the room, he decided his path. And he finalized it when he killed those two men. And in that moment, he was going to be Michael Corleone, the eventual head of the family.
Yeah.
And so, like, you even see him, to me, it would seem like he was even talking sort of Dawn-ish, where he's like, instead of losing a daughter, you would gain a son, you know?
Yeah. Oh, I guess.
Did you look
I
up?
guess the only difference.
And
The internet says he did have his jaw wired shut.
that's what Coppola said in his thing, is they actually wired his jaw shut to make it authentic.
Like you pointed out, so the scene you're mentioning where he's talking to Michael, what he says to him is that I didn't want you to be the ones on the strings. I wanted you to be one of the ones pulling the puppet strings, right?
Yeah.
Implying that he recognizes that he is on strings, right?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
The Godfather, like the famous logo of the hand holding the puppet strings,
Is not the Godfather holding the strings.
Right.
Yeah.
It literally connects to the word Godfather, right? Mm-hmm. The Godfather is
the one on the strings.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, in like your research or anything, I'm curious if Coppola ever, or Puzo even, ever talked about how frequently misinterpreted their work is.
Not that I heard, but to be fair, I fell asleep multiple times. So maybe it's in there somewhere. But I think that's it's the power of art, and film is just another form of art. You know, writing, music, all of that is art in a different way. And that's what I think is so interesting and so fantastic, is you can have all these different interpretations, and maybe the first time you watch it, you interpret it one way, and then you have different life experiences and you watch it again and you interpret it an entirely different way, and you see it in an entirely different way, and you can like learn from and interact with these characters differently. And we can sit with these and decide, like, what does this mean? Or like, you know, it provokes thought, and that's what we want, is we want to be, you know, cerebral about these things.
Yeah.
And it gives us an opportunity to have that moment. And that's, I think, why I love, you know, all of the different kinds of arts, because it touches in different ways that I think are important.
When I was done watching The Godfather, I don't regret the time, but I don't feel I needed it either.
Yeah.
There are a bunch of cultural references, and most of them I didn't even catch. Like, you know, when we finished you were like, so did you see like all the stuff you missed? And you know, all the connections now? And I'm like, I guess there was like two things. I think I said two. And then you pointed out when I was like, okay, yeah, 3.
And then
and then you did a few others, and I was like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think that some of that is because I am not terribly plugged in to cultural and social media and like just all this stuff. But I guess so it is a classic. It's probably worth a watch if you want to be able to say that you've seen this and to really kind of dig into the origins of some of the things that we have in our culture.
Yeah.
But for me, it's kind of like the Beatles, where, I just really don't like the Beatles.
You don't like The Godfather at all, though?
What?
Because I don't like the Beatles either. I would rather watch The Godfather than listen to the Beatles.
I don't want to ever watch The Godfather again.
What?
First of all, we've already established I'm not a rewatcher. But that was not a movie worth watching again for me. Yeah, I would hate to sit through.
But you see the positives of having seen it once.
I don't think I needed to see it. Yeah, I'm not going to enjoy culture better having seen it. Just like I don't give a hoot about the Beatles. They have a couple songs that I can sing along with, but for the most part, if I never heard another Beatles song again, I would be happy.
Yeah.
However, there are a lot of bands that I really, really enjoy, and when they talk about their influences, the Beatles are one of them. And,
like Metallica.
Yeah. So, I think that it's good that they exist, and they, and it existing did some good.
Yeah.
What
do you think, Josh? Was it worth the watch?
Yeah, for sure. It is funny that I think it's hard to be like, oh, this is one of the greatest movies ever made. Movies are so subjective, right?
Yeah.
And there's very few that you can point out and be like, oh yeah, that was one of the best ever put to film, right?
Yeah.
I do think it was a really good movie. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff about it that I liked.
Yeah. For me, I feel like the film is worth a watch. It's not a film where I'm like, I want to watch it a bunch of times. And I've seen it twice, which is, one time more than I felt I needed to see it.
Right. Because you only really watched it a second time because you were joining me.
Yeah, because I watched it with you. And so, but there were definitely things that I enjoyed from watching it a second time. So I do think it is worth a watch. I think it's definitely worth seeing at least once. And then, maybe from there you don't have to, but at least now the scene in Zootopia, you know where it comes from.
Oh, the shrews?
Yeah, the skunk butt rug.
Which never happened in this movie.
Dang it.
It's not in the
I
Godfather.
was waiting the whole time for a skunk butt rug.
So there's my thing. My overall, after we learn everything, boils. Kelly says it's worth a watch.
Yeah.
I love that you're like, listen, it's one of the greatest movies of all time. I give it a solid 7 out of 10.
Well,
Watch it once.
Did
Maybe
she
wait
say
for
it was
it's on
one?
rental.
I don't think she said it was one of the greatest movies of all time.
No, all of everybody else has said that.
Everybody else has said that.
Is that what people say? I've never heard
it's
that.
touted as one of the greatest films and one of the most impactful films. Like, it changed cinema.
Any list of top 50 films.
Any list.
Any list of top 50 films will include The Godfather.
Yeah.
Oh,
Guaranteed.
somewhere in the top 50? I mean, that's pretty big.
I mean, how many movies has there been?
Yeah, there's a lot more than
Nicolas
50
Cage
films.
has
much
done more
crap.
than 50 on his own.
Yeah, I don't...
Which also
Who is Coppola's nephew?
That's right.
So...
Greatness runs in the family.
Hopefully, I haven't said anything with any of my opinions that have bothered anybody.
I'll just cut them all.
Yeah,
Just
just cut me out. I wanted to come to this.
No, cut this part so it says, hopefully I offended.
Hopefully. I wanted to come to this with nothing but my own opinions. So I didn't look at any research. I didn't go to any interviews or anything. So there's a good chance I got lots of things wrong. But I wanted to, share what I could, whatever I could share, I guess. Man, I felt like I had somewhere I was going with this other than just apologizing. But I've already forgotten, I guess.
Yeah.
I
feel like this is kind of Josh's wheelhouse, honestly. Film is something that I learn a lot about from Josh. When I watched... The first time that I watched the one we talked about earlier with the Doctor Strangelove, is that it?
Yeah.
So the first time that I watched Doctor Strangelove, I was like, this movie sucks. It was so dumb. Why is this a classic? It makes no sense. Made no sense. It was insane. They're like caricatures of people. And then Josh explained the film to me, and I listened to what he said. And when he was done, I was like, everyone should watch this movie. Like, it's so, like, it was so impactful and so interesting, and now I get why it's a classic. So much more because I feel like it's what we learn from the people then and see the life that was their reality. And so, like, I appreciate that we get to have a dialogue about cinema, and it's something that, you know, I feel like I'm learning more on this one than I generally, you know, I feel like it's much more like you guys giving and I'm receiving than me giving and you guys receiving as much, which is maybe why there was a lot less shenanigans.
Yeah,
true.
there was
A minimal amount of shenanigans.
Yeah. But one thing's sure with you guys, if you shenan once, you'll shenan again.
Ha ha!
That's the new catchphrase. Put it on
So
the t-shirt. The front will say, "You ready to get tussed?" And the back will say, "If you shenan once, you'll shenan again."
So yeah, thank you guys. I really enjoyed doing this episode, even though I did sort of not write as much research as I usually do, but I think, you know, it was really interesting to me to listen to what you guys brought to the table. So, you know, I think that it would be fun to do this again in 22 episodes or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm down.
Well, no, we should do it again next year this time and just watch The Godfather again to make Brandon do it.
So next year when we do The Godfather Part 2.
No. Just every 25 episodes, we re-review Part 1. Godfather Part
What do you think this time, Brandon?
All right. Well, any last commentary before we go? You good?
Super good.
Super green?
Super Green.
Yeah, that feels good. If you don't know that film, shame on you.
I don't know what it's from.
What? The Fifth Element.
Oh,
Super
okay.
green?
Yeah. Okay, I got it. I'm there.
Okay. Anyways, thanks for coming to the theater with us. So I guess there we go. There's Arts and Crimes goes to the theater. And
Go do some art, don't do some crimes, right?
it's okay, bye.
Bye.
Dun, da, 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 do, do, da, dun, da, da, dun, da, da, do, 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 do. You don't
You
know.
think a lumberjack says played?
Yes. They're very delicate. Anyway. We're going to lose the lumberjack market. Listen.
Yeah.
Lumberjack's right in.
Yeah.
How do you pronounce
Plaid.
your favorite
P-L-A-I-D.
shirt fabric?
Yeah.
Flannel.
Oh, snap.